to our live coverage of elections 2025 here on Ignite TV, the Ignite Elections Update. We've been with you since September 1 when Ghana went to the polls to elect a new government, 6 contesting parties, and so far we've all seen what ought to be the results, with GCOM having uploaded all of the SOPs onto their site. And we are now on September 4th, and we're still awaiting the official declarations of those results, primarily because the PNC-led APNU, which contested these elections, has requested a recount for a certain section of Region 4, and that is in progress. And so it is expected that once that is over, then we can get to the final stage of final certification and declaration of the winner of these elections. We've heard from all of the observer missions, the international ones have spoken, and the common denominator for all of them was that the 2025 elections were free, fair, and transparent, and that they found absolutely no evidence that suggested any voter's right to cast a vote was impeded, that suggested that GCOM's operation was compromised in any way, or that suggested that the outcome of the elections could have been impacted negatively by any of the administrative issues that arose during the conduct of those elections. Administrative issues like 1 or 2 election polling stations opening late, 1 or 2 polling stations having issues with the delivery of the ballot boxes, 1 instance of a differently abled person not being able to have immediate unfettered access to his polling booth. Those issues, not minor, but those issues they pointed to as not reaching the level of causing any legal impediment to the exercise of the franchise of a vote. We've also heard from many of the local observer missions, the Private Sector Commission, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, have all spoken, and the common denominator is quite the same. We've had recommendations too for the next elections that they would hope to see go into play. Some of the internationals saying that they would like to see reforms of the makeup of the Constitution, but noting very importantly that any such a process has to be a Guyanese solution, that any framework to be built for campaign financing, any framework to be built for the use of state resources and how that is managed must be a Guyanese solution, because these are not unique to Guyana, and they're global issues in all democracies. And we heard similar sentiments from the local observer missions as well. I'm joined again by the chairman of the Private Sector Commission, Jerry Gavaya Jr. He has come on before to give us his early take following the close of polls on September 1, and we're very happy to be inviting him on now. He's coming straight from the GCOM tabulation center where that recount is ongoing. Jerry, tell us what was happening today.
Well, thank you, Dario. So, as you know, the recount has commenced at 8 o'clock this morning. 8:03 to be exact is when the first container was opened and the ballot box started coming out. We've had observers there all day. The count is going until the count is finished, and we will have observers until all through the night into tomorrow. One thing I keep saying about democracy is that you may not like it, you may not agree with it, but if it's the democratic process, then we have to respect the process, we have to respect the rule of law, and that's exactly what's happening here with the recount. We observed the elections from nomination day to the Discipline Forces Day, to the General Elections Day. We observed the elections through the counting, preparation of the SOPs, the regional tabulations and declarations, and we saw nothing major, nothing that will significantly change any outcomes, nothing that will significantly impact any of the processes. So, whilst we were a bit surprised when the request for recount came out, we respect the process, and we're glad to see that GCOM is following the rule of law. And I have to tell you that they're making a very special effort to make sure that they're following the ROPA. They're following the act, they're following the rule of law to the letter, and I have to really commend the chairman and the CEO of GCOM and the leadership that they're providing, because what that is allowing us to do is that we're deploying our observers, we're watching the recount, and as of right now, there has been no significant changes to the disruption to the process, nothing significantly different from what was found in the counting of the SOPs to the tabulation. And what it just tells me is that the process that has been applauded from all of the international and local observers is holding true. So, you know, the private sector remains committed to monitoring, and we're going to continue through the recount.
And certainly you had your observers present in all of those polling stations. You observed the entire voting process and closing process at the end of poll. All of the party agents would have signed off on those SOPs and then finally signed off by the returning officer before upload is done. Were you expecting anything different therefore today to be revealed?
No, so exactly, you're absolutely right, you know, and the thing is that we were very impressed really with the major parties, that being the PPP, WIN, and APNU. We were very not surprised, but very pleased to see that at all of the polling stations that we went, and we canvassed many across the regions from 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. You know, the representation from those parties were very active, and they weren't just in a corner. They were active. They were reviewing everything during the counting of the SOPs. They were very active in verifying things. So when they signed there, you know, it gave us a sense of, you know what, this was one of the most interactive and effectively run elections, because you're getting the buy-in from the party members, the party agents that are there. So no, we aren't expecting anything significantly different, because it was signed off by the party agents on multiple levels, and we're going through the process again. It is meticulous, it is slow, but it is efficient.
The leader of the opposition, leader of the PNC-led APNO that contested these elections in a request for the recount, certainly in his public statement, indicated that they had concerns for the particular area of Region 4 for which the recount was requested, that there were some anomalies. I think he referred to statements not having been signed, certain documents being absent. During the recount so far for the day, was any of that picked up?
So the thing is that, you know, if there's any irregularities with the SOPs, that is picked up in the tabulation phase. So there is a check and balance in the process to address that. So if there were any SOPs that were found to have unsigned areas, or maybe they wanted to verify the signature because, you know, and I've seen cases where it's, you know, like when you start to sign, sometimes the start of your signature, the ink isn't flowing as well, or something like that. So there was areas where part of it was a little bit more faded than the other, and they called the POs in. The POs came in and verified or re-signed in some cases. The thing is that keep in mind that the SOP is also signed by the party agents that were there. So, you know, the scrutiny is there, and at the tabulation phase, wherever it was found, it was fixed immediately. So, no, we aren't seeing any significant changes to that, because it was already fixed in the tabulation phase. So at this stage, it's going pretty smooth. There's some, you know, minor things here and there where some ballots that were previously said to be rejected, they've agreed, the party agents around the table are now valid. And in some cases, they're invalidating a few of them, and they're having that discussion, which means to me that the democracy is alive, the process is working.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to refer to at least one clip that we saw coming out of that recount process, where there was a heavy challenge to the validity of a vote because of where the X was placed. And the GCOM officials certainly who was there was at pains to indicate that there wasn't a strict requirement for the X to be in the box, but once the intent of the voter is clear, then consideration ought to be given. In fact, the Representation of the People Act says clearly that the ballot paper on which the vote is marked, A, elsewhere than in the proper place, B, otherwise than by means of a cross, or C, by more than one mark, shall not be rejected solely by reason thereof if A, an intention that the voter shall be for, that the vote shall be for one or other of the list candidates clearly appears. And the other reason, the elector is neither identified nor can be identified by the manner in which the ballot paper is marked. So there's a clear procedure to determine whether a vote is considered valid or invalid. And you said you were pretty pleased that the elections officials are following the letter of the law.
And that's it. You know, the beautiful thing about it is that because GCOM has consistently stuck to what does the letter of the law say in every step of the process, it's easy to follow. You go to the ROPA, you can follow it step by step. They've published all of their manuals online for the public to see. You can follow step by step what they're looking for. So what you read there is no secret to anyone involved. And in fact, for years, this has been trained into GCOM staff. And during the 2020 recount, after the attempted rigging, we actually went in and clearly defined what of the intent of the voter and how do you measure that. So, you know, in Guyana, we see people, they put the X in the box, or they may put it on the symbol, or they put it on the name of the party, or they put it on the number next to the name of the party. The point is that the intent is clear, and the law is clear. So, in all the cases that I've seen, and I personally witnessed a few cases where the X was over the number next to the party, and they brought up the law. They said, listen, we're going to talk about it. They brought up the law. Read it. Does it fit the law? Yes, vote is valid. They had one where it looked like a person scribbled inside the box, and they determined that that could be the person's name or an initial, and that vote was now invalid, right? Because they referenced the law. So everything that you see happening, everything that's happening in the recount that happened to the tabulation that happened during the counting, they're referencing the law, and it makes it super easy to follow.
It has been observed that 4,126 spoilt votes were discovered during the tabulation exercise. What do you make of this, given the degree of public education that was done in preparations for these elections? Perhaps more needed to be done?
Yeah, I would always say that, you know, more education is always a good thing. I think that, you know, the more awareness that happens, some people, I've seen it when I was in the polling, they get nervous. Right? They go into the and they're nervous when they're there. They're nervous in how they're folding the paper. They're nervous in how they. So sometimes it's education. Sometimes it's just human nature. In some cases, the point is that the process is very clear. The law is very clear. And if 4,000 votes have been spoiled, it's because that is just the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, that when you are doing hundreds of thousands, the incidence rate of some mistakes. That's what we're seeing there. It's unfortunate that those 4,000 votes are not valid, but the process caters for what is valid, what is not valid.
Is this of any particular concern to the private sector that you have so many votes can't be counted because of perhaps very basic errors and errors in judgment on the part of the voter? And does this trigger any consideration maybe on the part of the private sector as a stakeholder to partner stronger with GCOM in the future to enable the voter education to be much wider and deeper maybe?
Right. So, I mean, there's two things. One, whilst I was observing in the voting, the counting phase, we actually saw some ballots that you would see an X in every single box. So you would see some that didn't have an X at all.
So some of those might have been deliberate.
Well, that's my point. So, you know, in some cases, yes, it may be a mistake, but in some cases, people are deliberately putting an X in multiple boxes, or even some cases, I've personally seen it all boxes. But yes, I would say that, you know, the private sector stands ready to support, especially GCOM. You know, with our network up and down the length and breadth of Guyana, we are prepared to support in voter awareness and voter education. We have committed this time around to pushing it through our networks. We will always work to however we can benefit the country. We will always be there.
And the disposition of the private sector now that we are in this wait and see a stage of the elections, I would imagine you're getting constant briefing from the security forces. You are constantly reassessing the atmosphere around Georgetown. What is obtaining?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, you know, in the lead up to elections, we actually had a very extensive stakeholder engagement, which included the joint services. So yes, we are getting, you know, updates on any development that's happening from a security standpoint. Obviously, they're not giving us any details, but you know, they kind of maintain a low, medium, high kind of risk posture. So without the details, it gives us an idea of kind of their assessment. And then, you know, from the private sector standpoint, you know, we're working around the clock. We are dedicating a lot of our time to the recount now, and we will be doing it from now all through the evening into tomorrow.
How much maturity, in your assessment with the Private Sector Commission, have you been able to observe in the movement of the electorate from perhaps 2020 to now, or even from 2015, 2020 to now?
That's a fantastic question. I love the word maturity, because that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing a demographic of people, specifically the younger people, who are exercising a lot more maturity, not only in how they are acting now in terms of their exercising patience, they're exercising intelligent analysis of situations and so on, but even during the lead up, you know, when they're speaking to their parties, when they are listening to the parties campaigning, they're critically analyzing what they're saying, and they're doing the same thing right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the level of engagement that's happening with the demographics. You know, a lot more people these days are opening up their own businesses. We have the highest number of SMEs, small, medium enterprises, as well as entrepreneurs in our history. Those people are now invested in our economy, invested in our society, and they're paying attention. So they want what's best, not only for them, but their business and their employees. And that's now trickling through the country. So that, plus the fact that we have higher levels of education due to the free education that we're getting, there's less brain drain, more intelligence is staying in the country. And I think that that's starting to trickle down into communities that maybe traditionally, because of the cost, they wouldn't be able to have access. But those barriers to education are going away. So more and more people are getting the education, more and more people are getting opportunities for business. And I think that that is causing a higher level of maturity. And I have to say, hands down, the most impressive thing during this elections for me was the maturity of the Guyanese people. You know, this is the most efficient and safest election that I've ever seen personally, especially growing up in Guyana. You know, elections was on Monday, Tuesday was a normal day. You know, and that was amazing to see, and I love to see that about our Guyanese people.
And where do you place the new feature that has, by and large, eliminated the mystery and anxiety that surrounds the SOPs? In the past, the SOP was like a boogeyman. You had no idea where these things are, what they reflect. You had to depend on the word of the party leaders. Our SOPs say this, somebody else is saying something else. And so there was always room for confusion. Where do you place that new development on the continuum of the maturing of our processes?
Exactly. So, you know, what people want these days, especially with how, you know, technology is growing, we want almost immediate access to information. So the decision from GCOM to immediately upload the SOPs the minute they got to the regional office was, I think, a fantastic one. It really improved the accountability and transparency of the process because, and as you know, in 2020, you know, and you hear political parties, even up to now, you've heard, we have our SOPs. Our SOPs are saying that, you know, X, Y, Z, that we won or this person lost or whatever. Now, your SOPs are my SOPs, and my SOPs are the internet's SOPs because they're all the same. And what that does, it makes the conversation a lot easier. And I really do think that this added to the transparency, but also the efficiency of the process, because by the time it got to the tabulation, the SOPs were online, so everybody could see them, right? Organizations, both local and international, I'm sure, were starting to do their own tally so that when the declarations came out, we already have something we can compare to. That was fantastic.
And finally, what would you say from your perspective and from the perspective of the Private Sector Commission should perhaps be the next game changer move that GCOM makes that could be equivalent in terms of impact like the uploading of the SOPs?
Absolutely. So, like as we get past this elections phase, we get into the next 5 years, and then we go into elections again. There's a lot of work that can be done, and there's macro things like campaign financing laws that definitely need to be addressed, and the private sector will be speaking about that. But when it comes to the mechanics of GCOM, to make the process a little bit more efficient, they've done so much work since 2020 to promote accountability, transparency, and the ability to follow the process in an objective way. That the next step for me will be allowing the public and allowing the system to work with more technology. So, the hinterland community has always been a challenge because, if you vote in some regions, it takes a long time for that physical ballot box and that physical SOP to travel through the riverways or jump on a plane and fly across the jungle. It takes a minute. What we're able to do now, especially with like Starlink, for example, we can now start having internet connectivity, reliable internet connectivity. So I think the next step will be for them to work out encrypted, cybersecurity safe way of transmitting the data from hinterland communities using technology like Starlink, so that it doesn't need to come to a regional office. From the PO's office, maybe there's and it's 5 years from now, you never know what technology will be, but maybe you have a device that is directly linked through the satellites. So when they do their SOP, immediately it's on the website, similar to how it was this year.
So the next thing to fix is speed.
Speed
Between the uploading of all these SOPs and declaration.
That's it. Like what we saw, for example, in Jamaica, that they had an election one day, the very next day they had a new president, a new government. They're continuing to build their country. So that's what we would want to see here in Guyana, is that we've said it for a while now as a private sector. We want fair, free, transparent elections, but efficient. We want to get back to building this beautiful country of ours. So speed, from the time that we do our vote to the time that we can declare the president, reducing that time in a very reliable and efficient way, that's what we would support. And our terrain has always been a challenge. With technology, I think we can fix that.
What about the issue of the reaction of the contesting parties following these results, like we've seen in Trinidad, like we've seen in Jamaica? You think we're going to get there?
Yeah, I do. And, like some of the things that we also want to see develop is like, for differently abled people, we want that access in the physical part of it. We want to see, better signage as you get in. So those are some minor things. But for the majority, I think we're doing really well. When it comes to the parties that you're talking about conceding the elections, that is a level of maturity that I am hopeful our politicians will get to as well. As the people mature, the politicians must mature with them. And last time I was here, I said, look, if you want to be a political leader, you have to lead. And to lead, you have to take accountability. I think the next step is understanding that we are a mature democracy, and we can take examples so that, they're focusing on, when you lose an election, you haven't lost everything. You're now in the opposition. There's a job to do there as part of the democracy. The opposition leader is a key role in our democracy.
So conceding an election is something you see for the near future?
I'm hopeful, and I have a lot of faith in Guyanese, and I have a lot of faith in our political landscape that they will evolve with the people. And I think if the people continue to mature, we will hold our politicians more accountable. So yes, I do believe that by the next elections, we will have a party that's mature enough to concede.
Well, thank you very much for spending more time with us, Jerry Gavaya Jr., Chairman of the Private Sector Commission. We've been having great insights from him and other stakeholders who have been part of these elections. We will continue to bring you updates throughout the process until we have the end of the end. Whenever it comes, we will be here with you on Ignite TV Elections Update, and we thank you for joining us. We hope that you will continue to stay with us.